Unilateral training goes notoriously underutilized in most training programs. And this doesn't really make a ton of sense. Unilateral training allows you to overload specific movement patterns that otherwise just can't be done in bilateral stances. A lot of current videos out there suggesting some of these exercises to incorporate, such as the Cossack squat shown here, have a lot of prerequisite mobility requirements. And so with the mind of keeping barrier to entry low, here are 5 unilateral exercises to upgrade your training. First off, I want to start by looking at the split squat stance. Approximately 90 degrees here with my legs. Now as we look at the first exercise, the front foot elevated split squat, we can see that by elevating the front foot, we are increasing flexion at the hip and placing those tissues on the glute under more stretch. By putting these tissues under more stretch, we are able to overload them in a lengthened position. So whereas if you normally only squat to say parallel in a bilateral barbell squat, switching to unilateral will help you be able to get more hip flexion and then be able to contract and lift out of it. Now, if we look closer up here, we can see how hip flexion changes with a variable heights of boxes with the front foot to be placed on. And so obviously, as we increase the height of the front foot, we're increasing hip flexion. And so if you have specific goals about positions that you want to be able to be strong in, elevating that front foot can help you more so closely match those ranges that you are trying to strengthen. Moving on to the second exercise, we have the rear foot elevated split squat. This is performed just the opposite of the first exercise by elevating the rear foot instead of the front foot. And this can be done with pretty much anything in order to get that foot higher. And what this will achieve is the higher we elevate the rear foot, the more weight that we are placing on the front leg. So we are overloading the front leg instead of evenly distributing the weight more so between both of your legs. Moving on, we have the single leg RDL. And if you're familiar with stiff leg deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts, this is going to be very similar, just done in a unilateral fashion. And what makes this really nice is that we can incorporate stabilization and balance into an exercise that's really good at activating the glute and the hamstrings, which can be seen here from the soft lockout and the arrow indicating pushing the hips backwards. So as I go down, I allow my hips to sink backwards while allowing minimal flexion at the knee. This can also be done weighted by holding the weights in your hands down by your side as shown here. Or if you're looking for a tougher variation, you can try hugging the weight to your chest while you perform the single leg RDL. By changing where we hold the weights, we can change the leverages of the movement. Next, we have one of my favorites and criminally underused exercises, a Psoas Raise. Now this is done by keeping your leg straight and lifting up your leg, and works the iliopsoas, seen by the furthermost right image on the screen right now. By locking out the knee and really flexing and contracting that hip flexor in order to raise your leg, you might get some severe cramps and figure out how weak you actually are in this movement. For me, I really like inviting some lateral movement into this exercise as well, and I try and lift and hover my leg over a small object, such as a yoga block shown here. And this will also further help incorporate other muscles, a part of the hip flexor complex, such as the TFL, which is seen in the furthermost left image here. We can also use progressive overload with weights, as shown here. Just be careful while you're doing this, as when you up the weight, you might be more prone to flexing your lower back, which you can see me doing here, pretty close to the line of stopping the exercise. Now, if you really want to challenge yourself and take yourself to some cramping failure, I strongly recommend trying these kneeling lateral liftoffs. This movement starts off by finding a lengthened position for the tissues on the inside of your thigh. Then working your way down into a comfortable stretched position, you try contracting the muscles on the opposite side. So right here, I am strongly flexing my glute med and TFL. Remember, the TFL is that furthermost left turn picture, and the glute med is shown circled here in the center. A lot of people only tend to train in forward and backwards planes of motion. And so by training unilaterally and off to the side, you might find that you're a bit weaker in your hip and glutes than you would have known otherwise. This can also be done weighted just like the other exercises, although once again, you want to watch for excessive twisting and flexion at the lower back. Thank you for watching the video this week, and I hope you might be inspired to try some new unilateral movements into your training as well. I tried to include some of the potentially more common known exercises, such as the front foot or rear foot elevated split squats, as well as some less touched upon lifts, such as the lateral liftoffs and the Psoas Raises. Even if you try these body weight on the ground yourself right after watching this video, you might be curious to see how weak or strong relatively these different muscle groups are when trained in a unilateral fashion instead of the more commonly used bilateral fashion. As always, happy training, and I hope to see you again next week with a new video.